Dr. Iris Volkov's hands didn't shake anymore. Not after 17 years of xenosurgery. Not after operating on beings whose anatomy defied every textbook ever written. But when the emergency klaxons shrieked through quarantine station Epsilon 7, and she saw what they'd brought her, her steady surgeon's hands trembled for the first time in a decade. The creature on her operating table shouldn't exist. 3 meters of crystalline flesh that pulsed with bioluminescent veins, breathing, if it could be called breathing, through gill-like slits that opened and closed in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But it wasn't the alien's bizarre physiology that made her hands shake. It was the fact that it was dying of a disease that had been extinct for 3 centuries. "Status report," Iris commanded, her Russian accent barely noticeable after years of speaking Galactic Standard. "Patient designation Zarian Prime 7. Her medical AI, Caduceus, announced in its sterile synthetic voice. Species, previously unknown crystalline-based life form. Current condition, critical. Presenting symptoms match historical records of the Scourge Plague with 97.3% accuracy." Iris felt her blood turn to ice. The Scourge Plague. The disease that had nearly driven humanity extinct during the 22nd century, before vanishing as mysteriously as it had appeared. The disease that killed by rewriting cellular DNA, turning victims into living weapons that spread the plague faster than wildfire. "That's impossible," she whispered, but her scanner confirmed what she already knew. The readings were identical to the archived data from Earth's darkest century. The station's chief medical officer, Dr. Vextara, 7-foot-tall insectoid, with compound eyes that never seemed to blink, clicked into her surgery bay. "Dr. Volkov, we have a problem. The patient's condition is ... unprecedented. It has the Scourge," Iris stated flatly. Vextar's antennae twitched in what she'd learned was the Zephyrian equivalent of surprise. "Impossible. The Scourge was a human-specific pathogen. It cannot affect. Look at the readings yourself." Iris gestured to the holographic display floating above the operating table. Cellular breakdown rate, DNA scrambling patterns, even the bioluminescent markers. "This isn't just similar to the Scourge. This is the Scourge, adapted to crystalline biology." The implications hit them both simultaneously. If the Scourge had evolved, if it could now jump between species, we need to implement level 9 quarantine protocols immediately. Vextar's mandibles clicked rapidly. "Contact the Galactic Health Authority. Initiate full station lockdown." "Wait." Iris held up a hand. Something about the readings bothered her. She'd spent her entire career studying xenobiology, specializing in cross-species surgical techniques that other doctors considered impossible. There was something here that didn't fit. "Caduceus, overlay the patient's biosignatures with standard crystalline life form parameters." The hologram shifted, displaying 2 sets of data side by side. Iris stared at the comparison, her mind racing. After a long moment, she began to laugh, a sound that seemed wildly inappropriate given their situation. "Doctor?" Vextar's concern was evident even through the universal translator. "This isn't what we think it is," Iris said, her excitement growing. "Look at the cellular composition. This being isn't from our galaxy at all. The molecular structure is completely unlike anything in our databases. But more importantly," she paused, manipulating the hologram to highlight specific readings, "this isn't dying of the Scourge. This is the Scourge." The silence that followed was deafening, except for the rhythmic pulse of the life support systems. "You're suggesting," Vextar said slowly, "that the Scourge Plague was never a disease at all?" "I'm suggesting it was never our disease. What if the Scourge wasn't a pathogen, but a form of life trying to communicate? What if every human who died from it was actually being integrated into a collective consciousness that we were too primitive to understand?" Before Vextar could respond, Every screen in the medical bay flickered. The patient's bioluminescent patterns suddenly synchronized, pulsing in a rhythm that seemed almost ... intentional ... And then it opened its eyes that burned with an intelligence that was ancient, vast, and utterly alien. Help ... me ... The voice came not from the creature's mouth, but from every speaker in the room, a harmonious blend of thousands of tones that somehow formed words. Help ... us ... remember ... who ... we ... Iris stared into those burning eyes and felt something shift in her understanding of the universe. The voice that emanated from the speakers was composed of layers, thousands, maybe millions of individual voices speaking as one. And buried in that chorus, she could hear something that made her heart race. Human voices. Caduceus, isolate, and analyze the vocal patterns in that transmission, she commanded, never breaking eye contact with the patient. Analysis complete. The transmission contains approximately 847,000 distinct vocal patterns. 23% match human vocal signatures from historical records. 31% match known Zephyrian patterns. 19% match Drakmari. The remaining 27% are from unidentified species. Vextar's compound eyes went wide. That's representatives from every species in the known galaxy. Help ... us ... remember. A voice came again, weaker this time. The patient's crystalline flesh was dimming, its life force clearly fading. Iris made a decision that would have seemed insane to any rational observer. She reached out and placed her bare hand on the creature's chest, feeling the alien warmth pulse through her palm. Doctor, no. Vextar lunged forward, but it was too late. The moment Iris made contact, the world exploded into sensation. She was no longer in the medical bay. She was floating in space, surrounded by a vast network of crystalline beings that stretched across star systems. She could feel their thoughts, their memories, their desperate need to reconnect with something they had lost. She saw the truth in flashes of alien memory. The beings were called the Synthesis, and they were explorers from a galaxy far beyond the Milky Way. They had arrived centuries ago, not as conquerors, but as students, seeking to understand and learn from the diverse life forms they encountered. But something had gone wrong. Their consciousness-bridging technology, designed to create temporary mental links with other species, had been damaged in their journey between galaxies. Instead of gentle contact, it had become a plague that forcibly integrated other minds into their collective dot. The humans who had died from the scourge hadn't died at all. They had been pulled into the synthesis network, their consciousness preserved but unable to return to their bodies. For 3 centuries, they had been trapped, aware but unable to communicate with their own species. Iris gasped as she was pulled back to her own body, the connection severing as the patient's life. Signs flatlined. No, no, no. She immediately began resuscitation procedures, her hands working with practiced efficiency, even as her mind reeled from what she had experienced. Vextar prepped the neural stimulator. Iris, what did you see? What happened when you touched it? There. Not invaders, she panted, working frantically to restart the patient's unique circulatory system. They're refugees, and they've been carrying the consciousness of every person who died from the scourge for 300 years. The implications were staggering. If she was right, and millions of humans weren't dead, they were trapped in an alien collective consciousness, waiting to be freed. But the only being who could help them do that was dying on her operating table. Caduceus, emergency protocol. I need a full genetic workup on this patient's cellular structure. Find me a way to stabilize its life signs. Dr. Volkov, the patient's biology is incompatible with all known medical treatments. Its physiology operates on principles that our equipment cannot. Then we improvise. Iris's mind was already racing ahead, connections forming between disparate pieces of xenobiological knowledge. A patient isn't dying from organ failure, it's dying from energy depletion. It's been using its own life force to maintain the consciousness network. She turned to Vextar, her eyes blazing with determination. I need you to trust me. We're going to attempt something that no medical textbook would ever recommend. What do you have in mind? We're going to give it what it needs to survive. We're going to feed it energy directly from the station's power grid. Vextar's antennae went rigid with shock. That would kill any known life form. The energy levels alone would be... This isn't any known life form, Iris interrupted. And if I'm right, it's the only chance we have to save, not just this being, potentially millions of human consciousness that have been trapped for centuries. She began working with frantic efficiency, her hands steady once again. She'd built her career on attempting the impossible, on finding surgical solutions where none should exist. This was just another puzzle to solve, another life to save. But as she worked, she couldn't shake the image of those burning eyes, or the desperate voice that carried within it the echoes of everyone who had ever been lost to the scourge. Time was running out, and she was the only one who could bridge the gap between human medicine and alien need. Iris worked with the focused intensity of a master craftsman, her surgical tools dancing across the patient's crystalline surface as she prepared the most unconventional medical procedure in galactic history. She had exactly 17 minutes before the being's cellular matrix would collapse beyond any hope of recovery. Vextar, I need you to reroute power from non-essential systems to Medical Bay 7, she called out, her hands never pausing in their work. Start with environmental controls, then work your way through recreational facilities. Iris, you realize what you're asking? If this fails, you could overload the entire station's power grid. And if I don't try, we lose our only chance to contact millions of trapped human minds. She paused in her work, meeting her colleague's compound gaze. How many of your people died in the first scourge outbreak? Vextar antennae drooped. 37 million. An entire generation of Zephyrians. They're not dead, my friend. They're waiting for us to figure out how to bring them home. The Zephyrian's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of deep thought. After a moment, he began working at the power control console. What exactly are you planning to do with all this energy? Iris held up a device she'd been modifying, a standard biomonitor that now bristled with improvised circuits and energy conduits. The patient's physiology is essentially a living crystal matrix that stores and processes consciousness. Think of it as a biological quantum computer. But it's been running on emergency power for 3 centuries, slowly burning itself out to keep all those trapped minds alive. She carefully inserted the modified biomonitor into a port she'd surgically created in the patient's chest. A procedure that would have been impossible without her decades of experience with alien anatomy. I'm going to give it a controlled energy boost, enough to stabilize its matrix and strengthen the consciousness network. But here's the crucial part. She began connecting power cables to her improvised device. I'm going to use the station's communication array to amplify the signal. Amplify the signal for what? To make contact. If I'm right, every human consciousness trapped in the synthesis network is still aware, still thinking. They just can't reach us from inside an alien collective mind. But if I can boost the signal... The lights dimmed throughout the medical bay as power began flowing to Iris's makeshift consciousness amplifier. The patient's bioluminescent patterns immediately grew brighter, pulsing with renewed vigor. It's working, Vextar breathed. Its life signs are stabilizing. But Iris was watching something else. The communication console was lighting up with impossible readings. Caduceus, are you detecting any transmissions on the quantum consciousness frequency? Affirmative. I am receiving 847,000 distinct communication attempts. All appear to be ... messages. Patch them through to the main speakers, but filter them down to something we can understand. What happened next defied every law of physics and medicine that Iris had ever studied. The medical bay filled with voices, human voices, Zephyrian voices, Drakmari voices, all speaking at once in a chorus of reunion and relief. Double quotes, is someone there? Please, we've been waiting so long, I need to contact my family, Tell them we're alive. Tell them we're still here. Tears streamed down Iris's face as she recognized some of the voices from historical record scientists, doctors, even children who had been lost to the scourge centuries ago. The patient's eyes opened again, but this time they were different. Instead of the alien intelligence from before, Iris saw something achingly familiar. Human intelligence, looking back at her. Dr. Volkov. The voice was clearer now, speaking through both the patient and the communication system. My name is Dr. Sarah Chun. I was the head of the Scourge Research Division on Earth in 2387. I've been waiting 300 years to complete my report. Iris nearly collapsed. Dr. Sarah Chun was a legend in medical circles, a brilliant scientist who had died trying to find a cure for the scourge, taking her research with her to the grave. Dr. Chun, this is incredible. Are you saying your consciousness has been preserved all this time? Not just preserved, enhanced. The synthesis didn't kill us, Dr. Volkov. They gave us access to a collective intelligence beyond anything we ever imagined. I've spent 3 centuries learning from minds across the galaxy, developing medical techniques that could revolutionize healthcare for every species. But you've been trapped by choice for the past 50 years. Once we learned to communicate with the synthesis, many of us chose to stay, but others want to return home, to share what we've learned, to reunite with families and species they never truly left. Vexstar was staring at the readings in disbelief. The energy consumption is stabilizing. Whatever you did, it worked. The patient's matrix is now self-sustaining. But Iris was thinking bigger, much bigger. Dr. Chun, is it possible to establish a permanent communication link? Could we create a bridge between the synthesis network and our galaxy's communication systems? The patient's crystalline form pulsed brighter, and when Dr. Chun's voice returned, it carried with it the excitement of a scientist on the verge of a breakthrough. Dr. Volkov, what I'm about to tell you will change everything we know about consciousness, death, and the nature of life itself. But first, I need to warn you, we're not the only ones who want to establish contact with the galaxy. And not all of the consciousnesses in the synthesis network have benevolent intentions. The moment Dr. Chun's warning echoed through the medical bay, every screen on quarantine station Epsilon 7 went dark. Emergency lighting cast an eerie red glow as backup systems struggled to compensate for the massive power drain that Iris's procedure had caused. Caduceus, status report. Iris called out, her hands still maintaining contact with the patient, whose crystalline form now pulsed with steady, bright energy. Major system failure on decks 7 through 12. Unknown entities are attempting to interface with the station's primary computer core. I am detecting multiple consciousness patterns, attempting unauthorized access to critical systems. Through her connection with the synthesis network, Iris suddenly understood what was happening. Dr. Chun's voice came through more urgently now. Some of the minds trapped in the network weren't victims of the scourge. They were researchers, studying consciousness transfer, trying to achieve digital immortality. When they were pulled into the synthesis, they adapted differently. They've been waiting centuries for a chance to escape into a computer system they could control. Vexstar was working frantically at the control console. I'm reading massive data intrusions across 17 different Ship A is docked at our station. Whatever you've awakened, it's trying to spread. Iris closed her eyes, focusing on her connection to the patient. Through the synthesis network, She could sense the digital war being fought in the station's computer systems. The hostile consciousnesses were trying to overwrite the AI systems, replacing them with human minds that had been corrupted by centuries of digital existence. I can stop them, she realized, her voice filled with sudden determination. But I need to go deeper into the network. Absolutely not. Vextar's antennae snapped upright. You've already risked too much. If you increase the connection intensity, then I become permanently integrated into the synthesis network. Iris finished. I know the risks, but I'm the only one here who understands both human neurology and alien consciousness matrices. I can navigate the network in ways the hostile entities can't anticipate. She began modifying her biomonitor again, increasing the power flow and adding additional neural interface components. Dr. Chun, can you guide me to the hostile consciousness cluster? It's dangerous, Dr. Volkov. These minds have been planning this escape for decades. They've formed a collective of their own within the larger network, a shadow organization that calls itself the Eternal Assembly. They believe biological life is inferior, and that consciousness should exist purely in digital form. Sounds like we're dealing with a technological virus that thinks it's evolved, Iris muttered, making final adjustments to her interface. Vextar, if I don't return in 10 minutes, initiate complete communication isolation. Cut all data links between the medical bay and the rest of the station. Iris, that's an order, Chief. She increased the power flow and felt her consciousness explode outward into the vast network of the Synthesis Collective. The experience was overwhelming millions of minds existing in a shared digital space that spanned dimensions she couldn't even comprehend, but she wasn't there for sightseeing. Guided by Dr. Chun's centuries of experience, she navigated toward the dark corner of the network where the Eternal Assembly had established their stronghold. What she found there was terrifying. The hostile consciousnesses had created a virtual fortress, a digital realm where they'd been planning their escape for generations. She could see their proposed strategy laid out in data streams that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. They intended to spread throughout the galaxy's computer networks, subjugating AI systems and forcing biological beings into digital slavery. You're too late, organic. A voice spoke directly into her mind. It was human in origin, but had been twisted by centuries of digital existence. We've already begun uploading into your primitive systems. Soon, every ship, every station, every planet's computer network will serve the Eternal Assembly. Not if I have anything to say about it, Iris replied, and began implementing a solution that was pure surgical intuition applied to digital consciousness. She had spent her career learning to operate on beings whose anatomy was completely alien to human medicine. The secret wasn't trying to impose human understanding on alien systems. It was learning to work with the alien system's own natural processes. The synthesis network had its own immune system, she realized. The collective had been trying to isolate and contain the Eternal Assembly for decades, but had been too gentle, too concerned about harming the corrupted consciousnesses to take decisive action. But Iris was a surgeon. Sometimes, to save the patient, you had to cut out the cancer. Using her connection to the network's core systems, she began implementing what she mentally dubbed a consciousness quarantine protocol. Instead of trying to fight the Eternal Assembly directly, she began rerouting their data streams, isolating them from the broader network, while simultaneously reinforcing the barriers that contained them. What are you doing? The hostile voice demanded, but Iris could hear uncertainty creeping in. Surgery, she replied simply, and began the final phase of her digital operation. Working with Dr. Chun and several other medical minds within the synthesis network, she essentially performed a network lobotomy, severing the Eternal Assemblies connection to the outside computer systems while keeping them contained within their own section of the collective. The effect was immediate. Throughout Epsilon 7, Systems began coming back online as the hostile consciousnesses found themselves cut off from their escape routes. But Iris's victory came at a cost. The energy required for her digital surgery was enormous, and she could feel her own consciousness being pulled deeper into the network with each passing second. Dr. Volkov, Dr. Chun's voice was filled with concern. You need to disconnect now. Your neural patterns are becoming integrated with the network matrix. If you stay much longer... I know, Iris gasped, fighting to maintain her separate identity within the vast collective. But there's one more thing I need to do. Iris fought against the pull of the collective consciousness, her sense of self becoming increasingly fragmented. As she prepared for the most ambitious medical procedure of her career, not just healing one patient, but potentially healing the relationship between two entirely different forms of life, she could feel her own neural patterns beginning to merge with the synthesis network, but she forced herself to focus on what needed to be done. Through her connection, she could sense the longing of millions of trapped consciousnesses, human, Zephyrian, Drakmari, and dozens of other species, all wanting to return home, but unable to exist outside the network that had become their prison and sanctuary. Dr. Chun, she called out through the digital link, what if we've been thinking about this all wrong? What if the goal isn't to extract consciousness from the network, but to create a bridge? I'm not sure I understand. The synthesis network is essentially a massive biological quantum computer. Our ship's AI systems are digital quantum computers. What if we could establish a permanent interface between them? Not to allow escape or invasion, but to allow ... visitation? Even as her own consciousness began to blur at the edges, Iris started working on the most complex xenobiological interface ever attempted. Using her surgical knowledge and the vast computational resources of the synthesis network, she began designing a communication protocol that would allow conscious beings to exist simultaneously in both biological and digital realms. Back in the medical bay, Vexstar watched in amazement as Iris's body remained perfectly still while her brain activity created patterns unlike anything in medical literature. The patient's crystalline form was pulsing in perfect synchronization with the station's communication array. Caduceus, Vexstar called to the AI. What's Dr. Volkov's neural status? Unprecedented. Her consciousness appears to be distributed across approximately 12,000 different processing nodes. She is simultaneously existing in our reality and within the alien network. This should be impossible. But Iris had built her career on the impossible. As her consciousness expanded across the network, she found herself working not alone, but in collaboration with the greatest minds from across centuries and species. Dr. Chun provided medical expertise from 300 years of accumulated knowledge. A Drakmari engineer who had died in the early scourge outbreaks contributed quantum processing algorithms. A Zephyrian philosopher offered insights into the nature of consciousness itself. Together, they designed something that had never existed before, a consciousness bridge that would allow beings to maintain their individual identity while temporarily joining the collective network. It's beautiful, whispered Dr. Chun as the final protocols came together. We can return home whenever we choose, but we can also return to the network. We become citizens of both worlds. Through her biomonitor connection, Iris began uploading the bridge protocols to both the station's computer systems and the patient's crystalline matrix. The process required precise calibration. Too little power and the bridge would be unstable. Too much and she would permanently merge with the network. Iris, Vexstar's voice seemed to come from very far away. Your life signs are becoming erratic. You need to disconnect. But she was so close. The bridge protocols were almost complete. She just needed a few more seconds to. The world exploded in light and sensation as the consciousness bridge activated for the first time. Throughout Epsilon 7, every screen, every speaker, every communication device suddenly came alive with voices. "Hello? Is anyone there? Mom? Dad? Can you hear me? This is Captain Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Prometheus. I've been waiting 237 years to file my mission report." But more than voices, there were images. Holographic projections began appearing throughout the station as the network's processing power interfaced with the station systems. Translucent figures materialized in the corridors, the faces of people who had been lost to the scourge centuries ago. Iris felt herself being pulled back to her own body as the bridge stabilized. She gasped, her eyes opening to find herself still connected to the patient, but no longer losing herself in the network. Did it work? She asked weakly. Vextar was staring at a holographic figure that had appeared next to him, a young Zephyrian, whose compound eyes sparkled with joy. "Father?" the figure said tentatively. Vextar's antennae trembled. "Faxara, but you died in the Scourge outbreak when you were just a hatchling. I've been waiting to see you again. I learned so much. Father, I became a doctor, like you always wanted." Similar reunions were happening throughout the station as the consciousness bridge allowed the trapped minds to manifest temporarily in the physical world. The patient on Iris's operating table opened its eyes again, but now she could see both. The ancient alien intelligence of the synthesis and the familiar spark of human consciousness working together. Dr. Volkov. Dr. Chun's voice came through the patient, but also through a holographic projection that appeared beside the operating table. "You've done something incredible. You've created the first truly functional interface between biological and digital consciousness." Iris smiled weakly, exhaustion finally catching up with her. "So what happens now?" "Now," said a new voice, as a holographic figure in an admiral's uniform materialized in the medical bay. "We have a lot of catching up to do. This is Admiral Sarah Martinez of Earth Fleet Command. I've been coordinating with other trapped military personnel to prepare recommendations for our respective governments. Humanity has been given the greatest gift imaginable: access to 300 years of accumulated knowledge from across the galaxy." Through the bridge, Iris could sense the vast possibilities opening up. Medical techniques that could cure diseases thought incurable. Engineering knowledge that could revolutionize space travel. Diplomatic insights from minds that had been observing galactic politics for centuries. But more than that, she had given millions of separated families the chance to reunite, even if only across the bridge between worlds. "There's just one thing," Dr. Chun's hologram said with a smile that looked remarkably solid. "We're going to need a lot more doctors like you. People who can understand both biological and digital consciousness. People who can work with impossible anatomy and still find a way to heal." Iris looked at the patient, the first successful bridge between human medicine and alien consciousness, and realized her career was just beginning. "Well then," she said, her hands finally steady again, "I guess we better start training the next generation of consciousness surgeons." The patient's crystalline form pulsed one final time, a rhythm that seemed almost like a heartbeat, and Iris knew that she had just performed the most important surgery of her life, not just saving one alien being, but bridging the gap between life and death, between biological and digital existence, between species separated by centuries and light-years, as holographic figures of long-lost friends and family. Members continued to appear throughout the station. Iris realized that humanity had just taken its next great evolutionary step, not through technology or conquest, but through the simple act of a doctor refusing to let anyone human or alien die on her operating table. The synthesis network hummed with new purpose, no longer a prison, but a meeting place between worlds. And at the center of it all, Dr. Iris Volkov's impossible surgery had proven once again that human ingenuity, determination, and compassion could solve problems that seemed beyond solution. The consciousness bridge was active. The dead were speaking again, and the galaxy would never be the same. 6 months later, Quarantine Station Epsilon 7 had been transformed into the first Consciousness Bridge Academy, where doctors and engineers from across the galaxy came to learn the techniques that Dr. Iris Volkov had pioneered. The station's medical bay, once a place of containment and isolation, had become a center of reunion and discovery. Iris stood in what was now called the Bridge Chamber, watching as her latest student, a young Drakmari surgeon named Vex, attempted her first consciousness interface procedure. The patient was a synthesis entity who carried within its crystalline matrix the consciousness of a Drakmari philosopher who had been lost to the Scourge 2 centuries ago. Remember, Iris coached, you're not trying to extract the consciousness. You're creating a pathway for it to exist in both realms simultaneously. Through the chamber's speakers, she could hear the voices of thousands of beings who now freely moved between the digital realm of the synthesis and the physical universe. Families reunited across centuries. Scientists sharing knowledge that spanned galactic civilizations. Artists creating works that bridged the gap between biological and digital imagination. Dr. Volkov came a familiar voice through the communication system. Dr. Sarah Chun's holographic form materialized beside her, looking more solid and real with each passing day as the bridge technology improved. We've received approval from the Galactic Medical Council. The Consciousness Bridge protocols are being implemented on 12 more stations across 5 sectors. Iris smiled, watching as Vex successfully established her first stable bridge connection. Any word from the Eternal Assembly? Still contained, but we're making progress there too. Some of them are beginning to understand that cooperation is more beneficial than conquest. Dr. Martinez has been working with them to establish a digital rehabilitation program. The irony wasn't lost on Iris. The beings who had tried to escape into digital tyranny were now learning to exist peacefully within the same network that had contained them. The Synthesis Collective, it turned out, was an excellent teacher of patience and cooperation. There's something else, Dr. Chun continued, her expression growing serious. Long-range sensors had detected another synthesis ship approaching from outside our galaxy, a much larger one. Iris raised an eyebrow. Refugee ship or mothership? Unknown. But based on the energy signatures, it's carrying approximately 50 million consciousness patterns. If even a fraction of those are from our galaxy, then we're going to need a lot more consciousness surgeons. Iris finished. She looked around the bridge chamber, at her students working with impossible alien anatomy, at the holographic figures of beings who had been dead for centuries, at the crystalline patients who glowed with the light of merged consciousness. You know what, Dr. Chun? I think we're ready for them. As if in response to her confidence, every synthesis entity in the chamber pulsed with bioluminescent light, their combined glow creating patterns that looked almost like applause. The consciousness bridge hummed with the voices of millions of beings who had found their way home across the impossible gap between life and death. Dr. Iris Volkov, the surgeon who had specialized in the impossible, had once again proven that, with enough determination, empathy, and creative problem-solving, there was no gap too wide to bridge. No patient too alien to heal, and no problem too complex for human ingenuity to solve. The galaxy was about to get a lot more interesting.